From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Hope everyone is having a great start to their week. Welcome to another episode of the Wildcast. Justin Spears here with Michael Lev inside the Arizona Daily Star studios. Lev, glad to see you made it back from Salt Lake City in one piece. As for the Arizona Wildcats, not so much. I know that they lost 45-20 to the Utah Utes, but a couple of injuries for the Arizona Wildcats, and one big one in Jacob Cowing, Arizona star wide receiver. We'll figure out what his status is moving forward, because Jedd Fisch, during his Monday press conference today, said that he is questionable for this week, but Arizona will know more in the next few days. But Lev, Arizona losing to Utah. Now they got a few more games left. They got one last game at the Rose Bowl against UCLA. Well, we'll see what Arizona's future is like with the Rose Bowl there. But you got one more road game against UCLA. And then, hey, check this out. Back-to-back day games to end the season at Arizona Stadium. Noon kickoff against Washington State, 1 p.m. kickoff against ASU. I know you're a very happy camper.
I think Ryan Finley, our colleague, put it best when he posted the news about the UCLA start time. That one is 7:30 Pacific, 8:30 Mountain. It's like good news, bad news. When it comes to the Pac-12 networks, the good news is it's earlier kickoff times, right? The bad news is not a lot of people have the Pac-12 network. So,
yeah,
if you're looking for something to do at 12 o'clock on Saturday, November 19th,
yeah.
Arizona Stadium might be the place to be. I think it'll be probably a pretty easy ticket to get. Unlike the Territorial Cup, that'll probably be close to a sellout.
I would say.
I would guess it typically is. And this 3-game season that Arizona has here, best case scenario, of course, they win out. They go 6-6. They secure a bowl berth. I think that's the least likely of all the possibilities. At this point, UCLA is going to be really tough this week. I think, to me, they're the second best team in the league behind Oregon.
Behind Oregon?
Yep.
Not SC.
No,
okay.
SC is, look, they beat Arizona by 1 score. They beat Cal at home by 1 score. They're kind of, we score, they score, we score, they score, and we just happen to have a better offense and more weapons than most people we play kind of team, right?
Sure.
Their defense is not great. They've had a lot of injury issues lately. All right, so 3-0, probably not going to happen. Could 2-1 happen? Maybe. Although, as I wrote in my 5 takeaways, Washington State looked pretty good on Saturday. I know it's Stanford, and Stanford is awful, but they put up a 50-burger after their offense had really been struggling. And then ASU, they're very feisty under Sean Aguano. They put up a fight.
They'll take you down to the end.
Yeah, they did that against UCLA, and they'll probably do that against Arizona. I think Arizona will be very motivated that day to win that game, and sometimes that's the biggest factor in that particular game. So I would say out of all the scenarios, 1-2 is probably most likely, 2-1 second most likely, 0-3 third, and then 3-0 would be the last possibility. That would really take something, just based on the way those teams are playing and based on the way Arizona is playing lately.
I think, speaking as somebody who grew up in Tucson, I think the season will be defined by that ASU game. Arizona can get killed by UCLA. They can get smoked at home by Washington State. But if they were to end the losing streak to ASU, beat their rival, I think that would be a great launching pad going into next season. But I think Arizona's season is all going to be defined in a couple of weeks, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But Lev, looking back on this game against Utah, and we're going to answer mailbag questions, a lot of interesting questions this week. So thank you all to who submitted those questions. We'll answer them here in the next few moments. But Lev, I've got to say, I thought I was going to expect more, or I did expect more out of Arizona on Saturday, and I thought that even if Utah were to win, I'd still like Arizona to keep it competitive. Now, I wasn't saying that Arizona was going to upset Utah or at least maybe have a real good shot at winning, but I thought, 7 to 10 points would probably be the range that Arizona would be in. and they didn't. And the game really got out of hand and really fast. And I thought that Arizona really took a step back offensively. I know guys are banged up, and we saw Wendell Moe go in for kind of the injured Josh Donovan, but then Josh Donovan came back in at left guard. But I think Arizona really took a giant step back defensively. And honestly, Lev, I don't know about you, but that game kind of felt like the Wildcats reverted back to 2021 rather than 2022.
Yeah, I mean, the offense had been pretty good for the most part this season. A few games here and there where they weren't able to keep pace with Mississippi State. They weren't able to keep pace with Oregon, but never a game like this where they're just putting the ball on the ground a lot. Just didn't seem to handle the elements well. The field position differential was like ridiculous. I mean, 21-yard difference in average starting field position. I mean, Utah's average starting point was the 42-yard line, and Arizona's best starting point was the 42-yard line.
Yeah.
Every other drive was like the 25 or inside, or maybe the 26 and inside. So
hey, Kyle Ostendorf got a clean punt off when he was in the end zone.
Yeah, but it wasn't a good punt.
So there's progress, but
it wasn't good. No, I mean, okay, yeah. If you're comparing it to the San Diego State where, like, he hit the ball off of Josh Donovan's shoulder or elbow or whatever, yeah, okay, that's progress. But it only went 35 yards. That was a situation where that dude, what's his name, Stonehouse, the guy the Titans had last night from Colorado State. I mean, that guy was like booming like 60-yarders on the regular and keeping the Titans in that game. That's what they needed, frankly. Yeah. And again, as I wrote in 5 takeaways, it was Utah's kind of game, right? The other team's going to make all the mistakes. We're going to play good special teams. We're going to win the field position battle. We're going to run the ball. Arizona needed to turn that game into a shootout, and they couldn't. I think it was definitely Jaden Delora's worst game since he's been here. And hey, that's going to happen. I'm surprised because he'd been playing so well. Seemed to have so much confidence, has played in plenty of bad weather. I mean, he played at Washington State. Yeah. You know, it's not like there's no bad weather up there. So the elements really shouldn't have affected him as much as they did. Like issues on handoff, exchanges, like just all kinds of stuff that I think they basically would have needed to play a perfect game or close to it to win at Utah. And they were nowhere near perfect. They were on the opposite end. They were really sloppy.
They didn't give themselves a chance to win, right? And when you're playing on the road against a really good team, you have to give everything you can. Like you said, you essentially have to play perfect to give yourself a chance to win. And they had 7 fumbles. The record is 9. So they were flirting with the record there, and they lost 4 of them. And we talked about it going into the week, Lev, is that all Arizona's defense has to do is just do enough, right? The offense, if they can trade points and then the defense can get a takeaway or two, then Arizona might have a chance. And then you saw right there, Utah they're about to punch it in the end zone, and then they fumble it. Arizona gets the ball back, and I don't know if they went down and scored. I don't know what the result was. I think it was another fumble, if I'm not mistaken. Because I remember that's when I tweeted, like, Arizona's not even giving itself a chance to win. Like, they're taking the ball away, and yet they're not capitalizing on it, where when Arizona lost the ball, Utah would go down the field and score.
Utah, I believe, had 14 points off turnovers, and Arizona had none. I mean, unless you count the safety, it's technically not a turnover. They did score after, and that was also the best field position they had, by the way. That was the time they started at the 42-yard line, was when they got the ball after the free kick. So, when they kicked off or just during the course of regular play, they never had good field position.
And then I didn't even mention the Jacob Cowing muffed punt, too. Just
that was really a killer because I think it was 21-7 at the time, right? Yeah. And then one play later, it's 28-7, and the crowd's getting into it and all that jazz. And Jed said after the game that he thought it was the right decision, and then after he watched it again, he thought it was the wrong decision, given the elements, especially. I mean, the wind was really picking up. It was like raining like sideways at that point. Like, just let the ball go, Best case scenario, it goes into the end zone. Worst case scenario, you're at the 5 or so, but at least you have the ball, and they don't have the ball. So it was just like it was almost everything that could go wrong did. I will say, if you want to look at the glass half full version of this,
that's what we do here.
A lot of freshmen. At one point in the game, when they had their Joker formation out there, they had Sterling Lane, Russell Davis, Jacob Ngaika, and Tai Yungalale in the game at the same time. 4 true freshmen.
Yeah.
4 true freshmen on the defensive line. I know one of our questions is about that topic, and I'm not going to have a firm answer on that question when we get to it, but I cannot imagine there's any other team in the country that's playing 4 true freshmen defensive linemen at the same time.
Yeah.
So, they say that these are the best players and they're trying to win now, but obviously they're trying to get these guys ready for the future. Yeah. And they like what they have. And that, to me, that's the most important takeaway from the back half of the season is do you have some guys who look really promising, especially at the defensive line position, which is the hardest thing to get and the thing they need the most to affect opposing quarterbacks, create more turnovers, sacks, all those things that they're just not doing on a regular basis.
And also, too, on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, think about how many number of freshmen they've started. T-Mac and...
Up front, 2 true freshmen
and
offensive linemen also starting.
Yeah.
Again, it's pretty rare for true freshmen to start on the offensive line at any point.
Yeah.
I always go back to when I was at USC and guy like Matt Khalil, I think he redshirted his freshman year, and he was the top 10 draft pick. Tyron Smith, I don't think he played full time. He played, but he didn't just start from the get-go when he was there.
You better put some respect on my guy, Christopher O'Dowd's name. He started at center.
Did as a true freshman?
Yeah, as a true freshman.
Okay. But it's rare.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rare. Even in today's day and age when players are more and more ready than ever, coming out of high school. So Wendell Moe's the guy who joined the starting lineup.
Yeah.
And I had said a few days, maybe a week ago, that he was a player to watch, kind of a player on the rise. And he elevated all the way to the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Jed said he's lost 38 pounds
38.
Since he got here. I remember watching him in the early parts of training camp, and he was really struggling. Yeah. He'd do a couple reps, and he was huffing and puffing and kind of had to, work off to the side. But kind of similar to DJ Williams, he's worked his way into shape and is obviously a prospect that they like. And heck, man, if you can go into next year with Sava Baker and Wendell Moe on the inside, maybe you give Savanaya a look at tackle. I think that's at least a possibility. You've got JT Hand, who's another pretty good looking young interior lineman. That's a good foundation.
No doubt.
Definitely have to figure out the tackles.
Yeah.
We think Jordan Morgan's going to leave. We know that Peyton Fears is going to leave because his eligibility will be up. So that'll be an issue. But hey, that's a nice little foundation right there.
Absolutely. I do want to be real quick before we get to mailbag questions, Lev. I do want to be critical on Arizona for a couple of things. One, I did notice that there was a 3rd and 5 situation. Maybe it was 3rd and 4, and it was a pass play.
3rd and 1.
Was it
probably
third,
when you're
wasn't
thinking
3rd
of
and 1? And then
from their own 11-yard line.
And
yes.
Jaden throws a 25-yard bomb that just sails out of bounds.
Yeah.
And my question is, is that a play call? We didn't have a chance to add Jed.
Yeah,
this.
Jed addressed it. He addressed it after the game. I asked him. He said that the free safety came up and showed blitz, and then the will linebacker moved into the B gap. Okay. So they were going to run that little option play that they run,
Yeah.
Which sometimes has worked, sometimes hasn't. But they were going to run the ball, and when those things happen, it's a check, right?
Okay.
It's an audible. My thing is, you got to consider the situation, the circumstances, the weather. I mean, that was when the weather was really bad. I mean, what are the odds of completing a 30-yard pass in that situation? So if I'm Jed, I'm I got to toss this audible out. I got to call timeout, or I got to overrule it, or come up with something different.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have been better off quarterback sneaking, handing the ball off,
quarterback draw,
anything other than that was a low percentage play. And I wrote about the 4th and 20 play too, which I thought was not a good decision, where they were at the 34-yard line, right, early in the second quarter, and they went for it.
Yeah.
I'm let Tyler Loop try the field goal.
Because that's a 51-yard field goal?
51, 52. He's got plenty of leg. The weather wasn't bad yet.
But if you notice, has he attempted
No.
any 50-yarders?
No.
Do they trust him? Does he not have
He's
it?
50.
I don't know.
He's 50% from 40 and beyond this year. It's not terrible. We've seen him in practice kick the ball onto the roof of the academic center. He's got plenty of leg. Elevation, as I pointed out in 5 takeaways in Salt Lake City, is over 4,000 feet. Let him kick it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna let Anthony Simpson return every kickoff, which I don't necessarily agree with, let Tyler Loop attempt a 50.
That's what I'm saying.
Come on.
That was my other criticism.
And if he makes it, he'll have more confidence the next time a situation like that comes up.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you need to give your kicker that kind of experience, especially for next season, because hey, if on defense you're kind of getting ready for next year by incorporating a lot of these freshmen, you have to be thinking about certain situations for your kicker. Because let's say, Michael Lev, there's a point in time next season, as I need to silence my laptop there, but let's say at some point next season when you're playing against a high-profile Pac-12 school. Remember, we talked about this a lot this season. Arizona's kind of in the lose small to win small margin right now. Well, what happens if you go into next season and you're more in the win small category, but you're in a shootout with a USC or any other Pac-12 opponent, and you got the ball on the 36-yard line, and you need to win the game? You're gonna throw out Tyler Loop, who doesn't have any experience then? I just think that getting him these reps now in these type of situations, regardless of the score, I think is beneficial for next year. And I don't know why they're not throwing him out there.
I definitely would have kicked in that situation. That would have been my first option. I'd say maybe would have tried the draw them off sides thing, but unlikely to work in a 4th and 20. They're not going to jump there. Yeah. And even if you punt from the 34, odds are it's going in the end zone, so you only gain 14 yards. My whole thing was what is the percentage chance of converting 4th and 20? It's got to be lower than the chances of Tyler Loop making the field goal.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, I didn't, but hey, no coach is perfect. You're never going to make all the right calls over the course of the game. I think Nick Saban was getting a lot of flack for chasing points in that game against LSU. Happens to the best of them. I like most of Jed's decisions regarding 4th down. I just didn't happen to like that one.
All right, Lev, let's go into the mailbag time. Oh, and one last note on the game. I will refer back to my last tweet that Michael Lev liked of mine on Twitter, and that is a Pac-12 ref walks into a bar, and then some chairs, and then some tables as well, implying that the referees are blind. Because, my goodness, that was not the Pac-12's best showing in terms of officiating a game. And then the Michael Wiley touchdown.
Don't we say that like every week?
Yeah. I feel like we do.
Wait, are you talking about the USC game? Or are you talking about the
Let's go back to every
Washington game
Monday
or
podcast where we criticize the refs. I've never heard of that call before, where Michael Wiley dove for the touchdown, and he broke the pylon. That's an easy touchdown, but apparently his hand hit the pylon before the ball did, which in college is ruled at the half-yard line. So by the book, it was the right call by the referees. I just have never heard of that. I've never seen it actually happen. Just a terrible call, man. I think the college rules need to go and fix that, because what are we doing here? If you break the pylon, that's a touchdown, regardless of what hits it, the ball or the hand. I don't get that.
I was asking Wiley about it, and he explained, oh yeah, they said my hand hit the pylon first, and I was like, wasn't the ball in your hand? Like, shouldn't your hand be an extension of the ball? I mean, how else are you supposed to do it?
Yeah.
The ball's in your hands. I mean, you can't control what technically hits first. I mean, just because the tip of the ball doesn't hit the pylon first, like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, where was he out? He was never out of bounds.
If I'm Michael Wiley, my next touchdown, I'm just kicking the pylon. Just kicking.
I don't know, man. That was really weird, and I'm glad they scored there, because the first play was a 2-yard loss, and then they're like, I think they called timeout, and I'm like, oh man, this just feels like they're not going to score, or they're going to end up with a field goal. And also deprived Michael of a touchdown. They ended up scoring on the QB draw. Very strange. They got to revisit that rule. That makes no sense.
All right, Lev, let's go into the mailbag.
Yeah.
Lots of questions this week, starting off with our guy, Brett Berry. He says 3 games left. What's your hot take for the rest of the season? Not necessarily record, but your hottest prediction on what we will see on the field. Man, that's a tough one.
Hottest take, huh? All right. How about T-Mac will be Arizona's leading receiver over the final 3 games?
Okay.
He already was, maybe over the final 4 games, since he just was this last game as well. Certain guys didn't seem to handle the conditions and the environment, the matchup that well. He wasn't one of them. He seemed to have no problem just doing what he does. If you really want to go crazy hot take, Noah Fifita has a moment, where he steps in and maybe does something heroic. I like his poise. It's like since the moment he got here. Have you ever seen him maybe one day? The one day he looked like maybe a little bit overwhelmed was that day that Jaden was out in training camp and Noah got all the 1 reps that day, and it was a little harder going up against the number 1 defense on the regular. But on the hot take front, something really unexpected or unusual. I don't know. Maybe that's it. You got any ideas?
I think I like that one, and then going into next season, you'd see the glimpses of Noah Fifita, him looking brilliant, and then what's going to happen with Jaden Delora? Okay, he comes back for another year. Is Noah Fifita just going to be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll be QB2 again? But then you got this Braden Dorman guy coming in from Colorado who's 6'4", 6'5", and just a big pro-style quarterback that Jed Fish wants. Yeah, and so
the longer you go, the less patient you become, right? Dorman will come in here and he'll be fine not playing as a freshman. Will Fifita be fine not playing as a sophomore?
Yeah.
I don't know. Their advice to him is, hey, you just keep balling out. You just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll see what happens. You're only 1 snap away, always. I don't know.
That's an interesting dynamic because you go from 1 year, you're like, Jaden is our franchise quarterback, and then you go into in the next year, and it's like, hey, all bets are off.
I mean, maybe.
Let the best man win.
Jed was heaping praise on Jaden last week, and he certainly didn't seem very pleased with the quarterback's performance against Utah. But I went for the whole offense. I mean, when I asked him about what he saw from Jaden, Jed was just he just was nothing was good on offense in that game, aside from the running game, which hey, that's a good sign. And it was a lot of runs to the left, which is where Wendell Moe alternated with Josh Donovan alongside Jordan Morgan. So, I think we talked about this as we were walking to our cars. I think Arizona needs to run the ball a little bit more, just for the sake of keeping opposing pass rushes on their heels. UCLA's got a really good pass rush.
Yeah,
Washington State has a really good pass rush. You got to mix in the run so that Jaden isn't running for his life.
Next question comes from Brad Malone. What has a better chance of happening? The Cats win their last 3 games and go bowling, or the Detroit Lions and Jacksonville Jaguars someday meet in the Super Bowl?
I'm going to go with the Jaguars and Lions meet someday in the Super Bowl. Hey, man, anyone can make the Super Bowl, right? The Jaguars were in the championship game a couple times, right?
With Brady.
With Coughlin, they were there. They were there that 1 year, against Brady, where the kind of disputed interception. Wasn't it Miles
Jack, Blake Bortles.
Yeah.
Jalen Ramsey.
So they've been on the brink. I mean, the Lions, not exactly, but as I said at the top, I don't think that going 3-0 is in the cards for Arizona here. I think 2-1 is probably the best case scenario for these last 3 games.
No doubt. All right, Rob Bowron asks, let's flip it and talk about the offense. The offense relies on big plays, is not terribly efficient. It devolves into Delora scrambling until guys get open 10-plus yards downfield. This begs the question, why aren't Arizona's talented wide receivers getting open earlier? That's a really good question. And I know that Utah, they have their guy, was it Clark Phillips, who's a really good cornerback. I mean, one of the best in the country. So he's a lockdown guy. I think it all starts really at the line of scrimmage. I think guys are getting into Jayden de Laura's grill really fast, and Jaden's trying to make something with his legs. He's evading pass rush while also trying to read his receivers. So maybe it all goes back to offensive line and then Jayden de Laura. But I don't know. I think that they should have more play designs to get 4 or 5 yard pickups, and it seems like they haven't done that the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't know why they've been throwing down the field so much the last couple weeks, because we've seen plays like we've seen bubble screens, we've seen like the slant where like kind of the two inside receivers will kind of create the natural picks, and
like
then the outside guy kind of cuts inside of them. They did have a nice play to Wiley on 3rd and 10 on the first drive, looked like kind of a middle screen. There was a play when Fafita was in the game the one to Cowing. Yeah, the one to Cowing where he fumbled and got hurt. I mean, that was a 4th and 4, I think, or a 4th and 5, and it was a nice little inside slant. Yeah, I mean, it's a little worrisome that guys weren't able to get open against a team that plays a lot of man coverage, but, Utah's corners are really good. And, maybe that's a lesson for Arizona's receivers that you got to really work to get open, and you can't rely on going up and making those one-handed catches all the time, because some opponents are going to make it a lot harder to do that.
The dude 1121 asks, where does U of A rank in the amount of true freshmen starting or getting snaps compared to other Power 5 schools? And I think that this might be the tweet that you were referring to earlier. Really good question. I'm not really sure. I wish there was a really efficient way to track that without spending hours and hours of looking at teams' starting lineups and snap counts and stuff like that. But I would imagine it's pretty high up there. I would bet probably top 5, top 10.
Yeah, I would say so, especially when you're talking about true freshmen.
True freshmen, yeah.
Not redshirt freshmen, which they have a handful of as well. I don't have the numbers. U of A has not put out the numbers that I'm aware of in terms of most true freshmen starts or snaps or any of that business. And frankly, we don't have the resources to figure that out. But I'm with you. I think it's way up there. As noted earlier, 2 true freshmen started on the offensive line. 4 true freshmen played on the defensive line. Jacob Manu is another one who's playing pretty much full-time at linebacker. T-Mac is playing full-time at wide receiver. That's a lot. Oh, Ephesians Prysock too.
Yeah.
Has become a starter, or at least is sharing time over there with Traden Stukes, who's also a relatively young player. So, yeah, this 22 class, we've talked about it before. The hit rate seems pretty high so far, which is a great sign. They need to do it again and do it again and do it again. Jed has talked about this a lot. Like, the difference between Arizona and these other teams is they've had a chance to stack one good recruiting class on top of another, and this staff has really only had one so far. So we'll see if they can continue to have success in that area.
D.W. Lee asked, do you think Jacob Manu has a ceiling potential of a Zach Thomas type undersized linebacker, or more of a college career like Scooter Sprott or Tremaine Bondurant? Well, Tremaine Bondurant was a defensive back, but he was also a really, really good player. I thought he definitely could have played in the NFL, but I don't know. It's really early to tell with Jacob Manu. Like, I don't want to discount him and say like, oh, he's just going to be a college player and that's all he will be, because I feel like in a couple of years he's going to be referring, when he's like getting drafted, he's going to be like, yeah, there was a Justin Spears guy on a podcast who said I'd never make it to the NFL and never get to this point. Now look at him. Who's the fool now, Justin? So I'm not going to sit here and say that Jacob Manu would never get to that point, but as an undersized linebacker, very impressive. I like what I see out of him.
Yeah, I love the comparison to Zach Thomas. You're always going to do like the Zach Thomas or Sam Mills or whatever guy you can think of who's like 5'10", and made it to the league.
You also said Dat Nguyen.
Oh, yeah, Dat, sure, of course. Do you remember him?
No.
With the Cowboys?
No.
Oh, you should look him up. It's another one. It's a good comp. Yeah, I haven't thought about him in a long time. But I have no idea if Jacob Manu is going to make it to the NFL someday. Can he be a good college linebacker? I would say yes. Again, he could use a year in the weight room for sure. Certainly like how aggressive he is. I would also say this, like, under ideal circumstances, he wouldn't be playing right now. Like he'd be kind of in a more of a developmental track behind a veteran, but a couple guys didn't pan out.
Yeah.
Malik Reed, we've talked about him on the podcast before. I mean, I haven't seen or heard from him all season. I don't think he's played it down. And Anthony Solomon has only played on special teams. And those were the two guys who were getting most of the reps at weak side linebacker throughout the offseason. And part of the reason that Jacob Manu's gotten a chance to play is that they didn't feel like those guys were getting the job done. Credit to Jacob for stepping up and taking advantage of that situation. He needs, they need to find a new middle linebacker for next year because Jerry Roberts' eligibility will be up. I'm not sure they have anyone in the recruiting class who fits that bill. That's probably going to be a portal thing. And to me, you got to bring in more than one. You got to kind of do it the way they did last year when they brought in Trayshawn Hayward and Jerry Roberts because you can't rely on a guy that's going to stay healthy throughout the offseason and a long 12-game season as well.
Senor Huevito asks, it seemed like the front four finally started getting some pressure on the quarterback. Then Nansen decided to rush 3, and they got burned. Why? Has rushing 3 ever worked out this year? It seems like an occasional blitz is what they need, not rushing only 3.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I didn't have a chance to rewatch the game this week because my flight was delayed getting out of Salt Lake City, so I wasn't able to track how many times they did the 3-man rush. I mean, there are certain circumstances where it makes sense, like let's say you got 3rd and 20 or something. You want to put a bunch of guys into coverage and make sure they just don't get to the line to gain. But I agree generally that I'd rather rush 4 or 5 than 3.
And it seemed like they were getting close to Cameron Rising.
Yeah.
But Cameron Rising's so savvy, he's getting the ball out.
I mean, they didn't pass that many times, so I think on a percentage basis, their pressures versus dropbacks was not bad in this game. It's kind of on par with where it was against USC. But I'm generally like of the school of thought of Don Brown, like solve your problems with aggression, bring more guys than less. I think the game kind of flipped, starting in the second quarter when Arizona had 1st and 10 at the 24. Then all of a sudden it was like pressure, and Utah started blitzing, and Utah had a lot of success when they were blitzing, and to me, like these aren't NFL offensive lines or schemes. These guys don't have, the offensive linemen in general aren't as skilled or as savvy, and the more pressure you can bring, the better. Jaden DeLora in this game, according to Pro Football Focus, was 8 for 13 for 113 yards when he was not blitzed. He was just 2 for 7 for 46 yards when he was blitzed. So you can see how effective that sort of thing can be. Looking at Cam Rising in the same game, all right, 11 for 19 for 129 yards when he was not blitzed, 2 for 6 for 16 yards when he was. So well-timed, well-orchestrated blitz can be a very effective strategy. I prefer it to the 3-man rush.
And kind of along the same lines, Brendan at Here for Ball says, time to have an honest discussion about firing Nansen. And I feel like we've answered this question or this mailbag topic a couple times this season. So you can't fire a guy after year one, especially a coordinator, unless they're like historically bad, like Iowa offensive coordinator bad. I don't think that you should even considering firing a guy, especially because he hasn't really had time to recruit. Allow him to get a couple of recruiting classes under his belt, and then in year 3, if he's still around and hasn't taken a job elsewhere, that's when you evaluate things. But right now, no way.
Yeah, we've gone over this. It's too soon to have these types of discussions. Also, I would say, did you hear Jed Fish talk about Utah last week? What did he talk about? Consistency.
Yeah. Having
the same staff, the same system for a long time and recruiting to that system.
He loves Utah.
He loves Utah. He used to talk too about how Steve Spurrier was able to retain his assistant coaches at Florida. Like, I don't think Jed is going to be. I think he's going to be patient.
Yeah.
He talks all the time about the build.
But you know how rare that is in college football nowadays? Because I feel like it's just a constant coaching carousel. Jobs open up, and guys are just constantly moving around.
He listed off UCLA's records under Chip Kelly, and it wasn't great those first 3 years or so, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty good now. I think he's a believer in consistency and continuity, and he's not going to fire guys on a whim just because things aren't panning out. Remember, he inherited a team that had lost 12 games in a row, and the last game they played before he got here was an absolute abomination against Arizona State. Like a complete and utter embarrassment.
Yeah.
Okay? And less than 2 years later, they're competitive in most of the games they play. Right? Their offense is vastly improved. I mean, these things take time. You can't fix everything in the course of one offseason.
All right, and we got a couple left here. AZ Puckhead asked, does this team hit 4 wins before the season is over with? Absolutely.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah,
yes.
One more win?
Yes. They will win one of these last 3 games.
Yes.
They might win 2 of these last 3 games. I feel very confident that at worst they'll split the last 2 at home.
And then last but certainly not least, I saved the best for last, Michael Lev.
Okay.
Conference realignment. Earlier today, Dan Patrick says on his radio show that San Diego State will be added to the Pac-12 as soon as this week. And then Nicole Auerbach pulled a Lee Corso and said, not so fast, my friend. Pac-12 won't be announcing any expansion until they land a media rights deal. Or could they both be right? Could we see a bombshell report in the next couple of days where Pac-12 has a new media rights deal and then San Diego State is added by the end of the week? Both could be right, but I think it's very interesting that we're talking about this. San Diego State being added to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I love the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably an issue of timing, really. Like, are they going to get the media rights deal done before they expand the conference? Are they going to expand the conference and then do the media rights deal? They'll probably, from everything that I've heard and read, do the deal first and leave in some language in there that enables them to expand later on. Look, they're going to lose their foothold in Southern California. Southern California is one of the greatest resources for recruiting in the country. Certainly the number one place that Pac-12 schools go to get football players, as well as basketball players and baseball players and softball players, you name it. And having San Diego State in the league would enable them to every team to play a game there every other year, and that's important. I think San Diego State is definitely like the favorite to join the league. I think UNLV is a school to at least consider because that's a growing market in Vegas. They have an awesome stadium.
Where Pac-12 probably headquartered.
Will be. They've been a brand in the past. People have talked about SMU because of Dallas. I'm not really sure that fits. You could add San Diego State and then Gonzaga for everything except for football.
Yeah,
which would be an interesting way to go about it. Certainly would boost the Pac-12 as a basketball league in a major way. And there's they're pretty close by with Washington State and Washington, Oregon State, all of those schools. But I think it's inevitable that San Diego State will join the league. I think it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, I mean, new stadium. And I know it's not really attractive for Pac-12 fans when they hear that San Diego State is significantly dropping the ticket prices for games so that they can put more butts in seats for the last 3 games. I know that seems like a kind of a downgrade compared to the LA schools. But if you want the Pac-12 to survive and you want to maintain your presence in the Southern California market, you got to take your best option. And right now, the best option for the Pac-12 is San Diego State, UNLV for the Vegas market. Like you said, SMU's a solid choice, but it kind of seems like an outlier because you got all these schools along the coast and then all the way in Dallas, you got the other team. But hey, we see it in the conference realignment. I mean, geography doesn't really make sense in a lot of these cases, right? With the SEC, with the Big 12. Isn't Central Florida going to the Big 12? And you think about all of
Yes, West Virginia's in the Big 12.
Yeah, so I guess geography
Cincinnati.
doesn't matter. What schools bring you the most money? I mean, I think it should too, but right now, unfortunately, it's not that case. So
yeah, I have been on record saying this, and I'll say it again. I think that USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten is just dumb. It's just dumb.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't make any sense, really, on any level as for what college sports and college conferences have been all about. And I understand that there's a lot of money involved here, and it's, maybe it's easy for me to say, but it's really not supposed to be all about the money, right? I mean, it's about student athlete experience. It's about rivalries, right?
About
like there's nothing that like fuels college football or college basketball fans more than rivalries.
Yeah.
Right? Like nothing is more exciting or a bigger deal than Arizona against Arizona State. Right?
Well, if that's the case, like if we're thinking about it from a basketball standpoint, like you're still going to have that rivalry with ASU, right? But then you can establish a rivalry with San Diego State, which I mean they have history there playing against each other, right? And then you add a Gonzaga, who Tommy Lloyd, Mark Few. Think about that.
That'd be
twice
fun.
a year.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Also, who doesn't want to go to San Diego?
That's what I'm saying. I take San Diego a few times a year over LA. Because, I mean, the only time we go to LA is for work trips. And I know, Lev, you lived in the Southern California area. You lived in Orange County. And I know you have a lot of friends there that you go and visit every time you go back. But think about it. San Diego, a couple times a year, football, basketball, can't beat it. Can't beat it. Unless it's, noon kickoff at Snapdragon Stadium. Then that can go away. I hope I never, ever enter that stadium for a day game ever again.
Yeah, that was, yeah. There was no, just to review from week 1, the sun was shining upon us there in the first row of the press box, and the power wasn't working. Wi-Fi was an issue. Other than that, it was all good though. And yeah, let's get a nice like 6:30 p.m. start next time Arizona plays at Snapdragon. How does that sound?
I love it. It can be, noon in November, but in September, in the early part of the season, no way, Jose. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Thanks to everyone who submitted your mailbag questions. We'll be back later on in the week getting you guys ready for Arizona versus UCLA. It could be the last time ever the Wildcats step foot inside the Rose Bowl. We'll preview that game and the Pac-12 schedule with sports editor of the Star, Ryan Finley, later on in the week. Don't forget to check out our coverage on Arizona football on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. And how could I forget? Happy college basketball season, folks. Arizona tipping off the season against Nicholls State. And then you can check out Bruce Pascoe's and my story on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.